We haven't got here yet, but we will. Robert Kennedy was campaigning for the presidency, and he just happened to be in Indianapolis, Indiana, addressing a crowd when news broke of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. So in Indianapolis, Indiana, Robert Kennedy was campaigning. He was giving a speech addressing a big crowd, and he gets news of the assassination of Dr. King. And he announces to the crowd the assassination. No one in the crowd has any idea, and he announces to the crowd. Now I want you to just, I'll give you a hand on this, but I want you to listen. This was his speech. This is off the cuff. He has no idea, obviously, before he steps up to speak, that Martin Luther King Jr. is going to be assassinated. So in the middle of his speech, he gets the word of this assassination. And he breaks up his speech and he says this: ladies and gentlemen, I'm only going to talk to you just a minute or two this evening because I have some very sad news for all of you. Could you lower the signs, please? There were people in the crowd that were supporting for the presidency, who were having RFK for president signs, etc. I have some very sad news for you, all of you, and I think sad news for all of our fellow citizens and the people who love peace all over the world. And that is that Martin Luther King was shot and killed tonight in Memphis, Tennessee. Well, you can imagine the reaction. He continues by saying, Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask, what kind of a nation are we, and what direction do we want to move in? For those of you who are black, considering the evidence evidently is that there were white people who were involved, you can be filled with bitterness and with hatred and desire for revenge. We can move in that direction as a country, in greater polarization, black people amongst blacks and white amongst whites, filled with hatred towards one another. Or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend and replace that violence, that stain of bloodshed that has spread across our land, with an effort to understand compassion and love. For those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and mistrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man also. But we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond those rather difficult times. So I ask you tonight to return home, to say a prayer for the family of Martin Luther King. Yeah, it's true, but more importantly, to say a prayer for our own country, which all of us love, a prayer for understanding and that compassion of which I spoke. Unbelievable speech to give on the cuff there. Okay? I'll give you a copy of that. You can put it in your binder. Who else is going to have to address this situation publicly? President Johnson. Well, that's what we're going to talk about next. What did President Johnson, how did he respond to this? You know, he's had quite a time, hasn't he? He's trying his best on this civil rights situation, and everything's just falling apart around him. Not only that, what else is he dealing with? The Vietnam War. So, President Johnson also gave a speech concerning the assassination, and he gave his speech from Washington, D.C. And basically what he stated, he said, quote, I ask every citizen to reject the blind violence that has struck Dr. King. Well, I don't want you really to write anything down here. I just want you to listen, because I want you to understand this part here. Police launched one of the biggest manhunts in United States history. A $100,000 reward was offered for information leading to the capture and conviction of King's assassination, again, which was a lot of money at that time. Immediately after the assassination, Memphis police surrounded the Lorraine Motel looking for evidence. The police discovered that Dr. King was shot from the window of a boarding house about 205 feet away across an open field. It was discovered that Dr. King was shot from the bathroom of that boarding house that was across that field that witnessed towards the Lorraine Motel. The police found a window jammed open inside the bathroom, footprints on the floor, and a witness stated that she saw a young white man flee from the boarding house shortly after 6 p.m. The man discarded a bulky package by a store doorway and sped off in a white Mustang. Not a hard car to identify. Okay? This bulky package that they found in that store doorway had 2 cans of beer in it, binoculars, .30-06 ammunition, various tools including a hammer, a portable radio, and a Remington 760 Game Master rifle with a scope. That was all found in that package by the store doorway. The rifle was traced to a gun shop in Birmingham, Alabama, and records show that the rifle was purchased 6 days prior to the assassination under the false name of Harvey Lohmeyer. Fingerprints on the rifle clearly were identified as those belonging to James Earl Ray, who was a 40-year-old ex-convict who had escaped from prison in 1967. I'll reread that because I know you're very good at writing some of this down. Records show that the rifle was purchased 6 days prior to the assassination under a false name of Harvey Lohmeyer, and fingerprints on the rifle clearly identified the rifle belonging to James Earl Ray, who was a 40-year-old ex-convict who had escaped from prison in 1967. After his escape from the boarding house in Memphis, James Earl Ray drove to Atlanta, Georgia. He abandoned his car in Atlanta. Then he got on an airplane and flew to Toronto, Canada. Now this gets better. And you don't have to write this down. Just Ray flies out of Toronto, Canada, and on May 7th, 1968, he arrives at Heathrow Airport in London, England. And if you want to get some of this in your notes, you can watch the video. He then flies from London, England to Portugal, and then returns to London 10 days later. He rents a room right in the center of the city of London, and he stays in that room until June 8th of 1968. On that date, he's going to try to fly to Belgium, and London police identify him at Heathrow Airport, and he is arrested. So he's going to try to fly again out. What's that? I'm not sure. That's a good question. He's arrested. He's got a fake passport. He's carrying a firearm without a permit, and he's arrested for both offenses. So he's arrested and charged with having a fake passport and carrying a firearm without a permit. But they know they have the man they're looking for, James Earl Ray. They then return him to the United States and charge him with the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. After he was, on March 10th of 1969, he goes to trial in Memphis, Tennessee, and he's defended by an attorney by the name of Percy Foreman. After King was assassinated, Earl was arrested. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover and Attorney General Ramsey Clark began to investigate the assassination, and they had established that Ray was the only shooter. So Ray goes to trial. And under the advice of that attorney, Percy Foreman, Ray pleads guilty to the murder and states that no one else was involved. He plea bargained. And according to attorney Foreman, Percy Foreman, Ray believed that the evidence was so overwhelming that he would be convicted and he would be electrocuted because he'd be given the death sentence. And he didn't want to die and believed the long sentence in prison would be to his advantage. Why? He has escaped before. So he pled out that he did it and he was the only one, because he thought the evidence was so overwhelming that he would get the death penalty and have to die by electrocution. And in his mind, he believed, I'll go to prison for life sentences and escape. He was sentenced to 99 years in prison in Tennessee after his plea agreement. And then just 3 days later, he complained that he was innocent. He stated he was misled by his attorney and he was pressured into that guilty plea. So he hires a new attorney, a guy by the name of J.B. Stoner. And J.B. Stoner requests a new trial, which is denied. So again, after his plea agreement with the state, Ray was sentenced to 99 years in prison in Tennessee. Just 3 days after his confession, he complained that he was innocent. He said he was misled by his attorney, Percy Foreman, was pressured to do a plea of guilty. He hires a new attorney, J.B. Stoner. He represents him, requests a new trial, it's denied. So Ray spent the remainder of his life in prison until his death. Now, one of my more prized signatures is right there. James Earl Ray. I probably shouldn't have done this, but I wrote a letter to him many years ago and sent him a book. And he signed the book, and I cut the signature out of the book and put it up there. Didn't write anything back, just signed the book and sent it back. This is Ramsey Clark here. He teamed up with... He teamed up with J. Edgar Hoover to do the investigation. Who's that guy up there? Can you read that? That's Percy Foreman, the guy that represented... we got it all in here, don't we? Yeah. Now, I'm going to skip this Raoul stuff. I decided to cut this a little bit short. But what happened is Ray went kind of crazy and said that he wasn't the guy that did it, that this guy named Raoul did it. And they went and did a reinvestigation of this thing and thought everything he said was BS. He even met with Martin Luther King's children late, just before he died, and actually convinced one of them that he didn't kill his father, which was just the weirdest deal ever. But I think it's pretty clear in evidence that he was the guy that shot Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, we're going to stop there. Here's kind of what we got on tap. I'm going to talk about a profile on Dr. Martin Luther King on Monday, and then we're going to talk about the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy, and then we're going to we'll take these notes out on Vietnam, and we'll push like crazy, and we want to try to get a vision of what's happening before we go to D.C. So when we go into D.C., we understand the Vietnam Wall and that type of thing. Any questions at all? Okay, because you have no school tomorrow, right? So stinks.
Let's do